This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Robin Jackson for the first time. I want to welcome you to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me. This seems like a really creative, cool community, and I'm excited to contribute.
Yeah, we love to talk to creative people. We've been on the air since 2016. We have over 1,200 episodes, and we've always had a sweet spot for talking to musicians. That's where the podcast started, talking to singer-songwriters
Right
and
on.
emerging singer-songwriters, creative people of all types. But you're an award-winning songwriter, multi-instrument. You play multiple instruments. You're an entrepreneur. You're a community builder. So you're right in the same space we like to talk to. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, it's totally my pleasure. I love talking about anything having to do with music, creativity, art, community, songwriting. Yeah, totally. Let's go.
So, like, how to use music and creativity and flow state to lead a more fulfilling life is kind of the topic. And
Yeah.
we've got your URL, Songwriter Story, right?
Yeah, if you can say it, you can play it. That's I know.
Yeah,
That's that's the name of my organization, my business, Songwriter Soiree, which is a community of songwriters that I started in Portland, Oregon, where I live over 16 years ago. And so,
yeah.
yeah.
And you've worked with a lot of artists, name check like Reggie Watts,
Yeah, Reggie.
Decembrists, uh, the
Devotchka, which they
Devotchka.
played, they did the soundtrack for the movie Little Miss Sunshine, and
Oh wow,
I've
that's cool.
played many shows with them. They're old friends of mine. Yeah.
You got like 60 million streams on your single Roses and
Yeah.
Gold.
There's a story behind that.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, I'm more of a underground kind of like a niche artist. I'm a eccentric experimental type of
Cool.
synthesis. But yeah, but I appreciate all music, and that's why I'm talking to people who are in this space. But I am a big fan of flow state, of kind of from a kind
Cool.
of from a I like to just go with an open canvas. I always think of music as a sort of sound painting, and
Yeah.
just kind of just let it happen, and then
Yeah.
kind of go back and pick out the happy accidents.
The happy accidents, I love that. Which totally is something that happens in flow state when
Mhm,
you're not thinking about it. And I just read 12 Notes by Quincy Jones,
mhm.
who's like, if you don't
Yeah,
know Quincy Jones, you
yeah, I
need to
know,
know
yeah.
Quincy Jones, the godfather of music pretty much in the 21st century. And yeah, in that book, he has a whole section on flow state. And it's flow state something I've been studying and wanting to live for decades. And I just love, he just talks so much about his music process. And I just finished listening to it, so it's kind of alive for me, where he's like, I don't produce anything anymore that's not written from flow state. And if you're not sure what flow state is, it's that state that's well, it's kind of only come into like life hacking and creativity in the last 30 years, but it's the alpha state, so the state between sleep and wake, when you're kind of in your zone of genius and you're
Yeah,
not and you're not driven by your mental frontal cortex, you're more in your subconscious, but you're
yeah,
awake.
you're kind of pulling your
Yeah,
subconscious. It's like
yeah,
because
your
like
subconscious.
95% of your brain is devoted to your subconscious,
Yeah.
and the problem is your logical mind will kind of wreck you. To me,
Yes.
when I'm a musician, when I talk to artists, like what I find is like if you put your 10,000 hours in on your instrument, right?
Yeah.
And you know your instrument and you trust yourself on your instrument, if you get so caught up in trying to be the perfection trap, or you
Yes.
get caught up in the composition trap, right? Like if I just let my multi-tracks just like hit play, jump on my piano or my synth and play with like sound design for like hours and
Hmm.
just let something happen. And then usually out of that session, I find something.
Cool.
And
Yeah, your
and I
happy accidents.
yeah, and I find that, you've talked to Herbie Hancock, the stuff that Sun Ra was doing, or you talk to like Miles Davis, you check what they said about their processes. Like in some of the most famous pieces of music that Miles worked on, it was like pretty much all flow state. It was like they had like awesome
Totally.
musicians, and they had a little bit of a roadmap, but they kind of let it go by feel. And
Yes.
kind of like the feel and the interplay between the musicians kind of dictated what they were going to do.
Yeah. I mean, you
And
can hear it in like every John Coltrane solo. He's lost in a world of himself that's
he's in the
brilliant.
zone. He gets in the
And
zone. I mean, you get that
you
zone
get
and
in the
you let it
zone.
happen.
Yeah, I'm a saxophone player. That's my main instrument. And I
Yeah,
just
poetry
totally
is
know. It's like you get in the zone, the hours go by, and you just get into that like subtle conversation with other musicians where you're not really listening with your mind anymore. You're really just listening with your body and your feeling, and there's just nothing better. Yeah,
like Charlie Bird Parker is
yeah.
like the
So
same kind of zone.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I love Charlie. So I wanted to circle back. The thing with Quincy is that he just really like, he composed the way that he composes his music is he sits with his head between his hands, staring at the floor. And people would go into sessions with him and they'd be like, "What are you doing? Are you asleep?" And he'd be like, "No, this is where my genius comes from, in this position." And for him, it was a place where he would kind of almost fall asleep, but he would just hear so many things. And I just found that, yeah, such a good reminder. And then he noticed whenever he produced something that didn't give him goosebumps versus did, it was such a big difference. And usually his goosebump material, he'd call it, always came from when he was in flow state. So
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
I have a big, uh, when I check out bands I really like, and I
Uh-huh.
look at people like the Velvet Underground,
Oh yeah.
like and even Bob Dylan and his process
Yeah.
with the band at Big Pink. A lot of that was kind of just flow state in the moment. Just like he would be at his typewriter, come up with an idea, and then they just go at it. And and
Yeah.
and he would just and a lot of stuff Dylan would come to him, and he kept on changing the lyrics. He would
Yeah.
change the song. I had like an engineer on that worked on like Blood on the Tracks, like
Oh
the
cool.
first version.
Great album.
And he
Yeah.
said like the musicians working with Dylan were having a hard time because he was like composing in the moment. He didn't
Mm,
really know what it
that's
was, and they
cool.
wanted to know what it was. And it's like, well, it is what it is. It's like I'm writing it right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's because he was in it. And I really believe like when you immerse yourself in something a lot, that you're gonna change. Like you're really like when I go into songwriting, I don't really write songs like randomly. I have to kind of go into like what I call a songwriting zone, which usually takes me about 4 days to lead up to, where I just go through a bunch of crap and like stuff. And I was reading, actually, there's a great book produced in the 80s called Songwriters on Songwriting, which is people like Dylan and Paul Simon and Joan Baez revealing their songwriting process. And I really related to that. For me, it's like I go through this period of time that I call composting, which is like getting all the crap out of the way, out of my brain, and then I get into like a flow zone where I'm kind of in this liminal space. And I think that's a space that Dylan often talked about, where he would immerse himself so much in the work of other people and in music that
Yeah.
he always just had like piles of words floating around
Yeah,
his
'cause he
head.
would read he was a
Yeah.
voracious reader,
Yeah.
and then he
Voracious reader.
also had picked up all these other styles,
Yep.
right, from other people. He had kinda gone to Tin Pan Alley and picked up all these folk
Yeah.
styles, and then listened to all these like, all this R&B and all this Delta blues and all this stuff.
Yeah.
America, like, all over the place. It's like all his influences are coming from, like, every which way, and then synthesized it like in the moment of each song, like, well, this song deserves this. This song deserves that. And it
Yeah.
kind of like whatever the song deserves is what it will get.
Yeah.
you know,
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
that's a cool thing because I think a lot of people like I think you're trying to get people to get into their flow state because
Yes.
people have a feel like I have never had a problem writing. Like I have a bedroom
Uh-huh.
studio because I write so much. I
Uh-huh.
got like 5,000 songs in the can.
Amazing. Oh my God.
And
Cool.
so I write all the time. I write 4
Yeah.
or 5
Yeah.
songs a week. That's not a problem for me because I found a way to kinda get past that wall,
So
right?
that's probably what a lot of people are interested in. I was just on another podcast a while ago where it was by a woman who's a neuroscientist, and she was studying flow state, and she wanted to know a lot of like, how do I help people get into flow state? And I'd love to offer a couple of things around that, which I think, first of all, if for all you songwriters out there or anyone who's creative, which is you can be creative in business, whatever, we often try and think our way through creativity or think our way through projects. And I've learned that when I'm having writer's block, which I don't really think exists at all, I think the block we have is either it's fear of failure or wanting it to be too good. But more often, and what Quincy Jones talks about is that you're probably just not in your flow state enough. And that consider, instead of trying to like sit there and like arduously force yourself through like getting a lyric or the music, like change your physical state in some way to help you get more into like an alpha state. And he was like, I think he said some quote, something like, the next time you think you have writer's block, consider instead that maybe all you need to do is get into an alpha state so you can hear what your heart really wants to tell you.
Mhm.
And I just thought that was so beautiful, because we're often in our mind and our heart is like in that subconscious under there trying to get a message through.
I always felt like, the Victorians had this idea of the muse.
Yeah.
And I always felt like artists have a way to channel, right, that connection. And that connection is not just external. Like the muse isn't this external thing. There's this inner and there's the outer. And then there's like 95% of your subconscious. And when you're willing to not play it safe, to not be ruled by fear,
Mm-hmm.
and to actually call into that and pull, like I just like to do an open mic. And I've
Yeah.
done this with a lot of people I've been playing since I was 17. I'm 57. And every musician I've ever liked to work with, I like to have like open sessions and let everybody just kind of bring their ideas to the table. And instead of just coming with a demo and kind of top down in it, with some people I've worked
Yeah.
with, that's what they do. They come
Yeah.
with this pre-designed idea and they want everybody to match what's in their head rather than listening to in the moment
Yeah.
what you could actually produce.
Yeah.
I think that ends up being the problem, is that you get the perfection trap or comparison trap. You're
Yeah.
trying to get to the perfect notes on the page instead of actually being in the moment.
Yeah.
I think if you can't accept the moment, then you're probably gonna run into a trap or run into a restriction or a ceiling, and you're not gonna produce.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. I love that, just that thing of like being in the moment. And that's so much about the creative process is saying yes to the moment and letting go of what you think you need something to be. And so I'm a jazz, I went to jazz school, and so it took me years to sort of like start letting go of just letting my instrument guide me,
Yeah,
and
that's a hard thing.
I wanted to get all the arpeggios right and like outline the key perfectly and play the rhythmic features that I was
With
taught.
like the classical music trap. Like
Yeah,
if you're playing Bach or Beethoven, but
and then
versus like if you're in a more experimental group, like I'm a experimental synthesis guy.
okay,
And I play with modular synths and analog oscillators. And
cool,
I let my mode kind of tell me what it wants to do.
that's awesome.
And so if you're in that kind of space, the thing sounds different every time you turn it on. And
Yeah,
it behaves different all the time. And some people want to tame it. If you come from the mindset, then you want a digital synth and you want samples and you want this. But if you're willing to let the oscillator drift actually be inspirational, or let the patchwork kind of lead you somewhere
mhm,
strange, that's a different type of trip, than
yeah.
trying to tame it. I
You
think if you're
just
trying to tame it, then it's like, okay,
yeah,
there's a place for that. And you can want to create something very precise, but that's, I think there's a lot of traps in that to me.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So
yeah.
so with grief and art,
Oh,
I always felt like grief is like in the your little handy bag of
uh-huh.
ideas as a songwriter. Like,
Always. Most
uh,
most songwriters, yes. Unless you're
well,
Rafi, maybe.
I mean, funk can come from joy.
Uh-huh.
It can come from pain. I love funkadelic. I love funk.
Absolute.
Uh,
Totally.
James Brown stuff like, so you can come from that space, or you can be like a Delta blues guy, be in the
Yeah.
depths of like,
Oh
oh, we're
my,
making
depths
a
of
crossroad.
sorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the depths of sorrow, or you can actually have a more elation or Stevie Wonder mindset
Yes.
where everything's about, oh, like we can elevate.
We can, yes, past it. What's the beauty in there?
Yeah,
And
or
yeah,
yeah,
I like looking at a lot of my I've got several records out, and I have a theme in my songwriting which I really love, and I love hearing it when I hear it in other songwriters as this sort of medicine of music to transmute hard things, grief into beauty. And I think the beauty of the song is being able to, I mean, you can just go with like Adele, which is just like, oh, this hurts.
yeah,
But, a lot of my songs, I love finding the silver lining in them, which is the name of my last album. Because I think songs for me help me process really hard moments, and then through the songwriting process, I really often, find sort of like a lesson or a growth or a way to hold the perspective of my life differently.
Yeah, it's
And
like
but
art therapy. It's
yeah,
cathartic.
it's therapy. I mean, I've had a lot of songwriters are like, my guitar is my therapist, and
Yeah, yeah.
and I think so many people can relate to that. For
Well,
me, it's
jazz is kind of like that. It feels like that's what people are working out their issues.
oh, totally. I love it. That's funny. I get together a couple times a month with some jazz friends of mine, and we hang out in my living room, and we just like get really weird for a couple hours, and it's total like therapeutic release, or in a space where like anything goes. I just
Yeah, that's like modal jazz or fusion jazz. Is like
yeah,
I like being able to go into cacophony, dissonance, and disharmony, and then bring it back to harmony.
yeah,
I like the fact that you can go and kind of do a Coltrane, kind of really stretching it,
yeah,
and then bring it back to something thematic, but then kind of go off. And then I like the ability to have these movements or key
mm,
changes or to be mood changes.
hmm,
And I think a lot of modern music is so into the loop, is so into the groove,
absolutely,
and it
yeah.
doesn't have like the movements. I grew up with with the Carpenters,
Oh, cool.
and what I loved is like you had you had Karen Carpenter could take a happy vocal, but her voice evokes like melancholy and sadness.
Totally. They
Yeah,
they
and
put
her
a real
brother had these awesome ways to arrange some of the great stuff he was getting. He would just rearrange it,
yeah.
kind of
Arranging is such
match.
a powerful tool. Yeah,
Yeah, to match her voice,
that's
or ma
cool.
and that to me is just something I don't hear in pop music, like what the Carpenters could do.
Hmm.
I'm like, I'm always looking like, can you evoke like that?
That's cool, man. I like that perspective. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a formula these days, which is, I think we've my mom's generation is often like, man, music is just so recycled, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't think it would. We've only been around doing this thing for not that many years, a handful of years, but the current like section of time that we're in, it's like, are we already out of ideas, like in terms of pop?
Well, it seems like the '50s to me is everybody's gone into this kind of pop mode
Right.
or kind of groove mode,
Yeah. The rock and
and so
roll, there's a framework.
it's back to like an album that didn't have a theme, like, not like Sergeant Pepper's.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
the Beatles brought the album that could be more introspective. They actually created, like, the concept album
Totally.
with
I mean, they
Pepper's.
were groundbreaking in so many ways. I love
Yeah, and
them.
Abbey Road.
They've
Sergeant
influenced so
Pepper's
much of my songwriting.
And Abbey
Yeah.
Road and White Album, like, they were, like, not Pink Floyd actually tightened it up. The
Mhm.
Who,
That's
with their
funny.
rock operas and Tommy and Quadrophenia, they actually
And
kinda set
Queen. Yeah.
Queen, they set the tone for that structure, but the Beatles were the ones to actually start it.
Yes.
It was like the sound painting, that George Martin even talked about it,
Yeah.
that you could be expressionistic in music,
Yeah.
that you could have color things and then represent more than what you could do live in the
Yeah.
studio. You
In the
could
studio.
actually
Yeah.
create like these layers of sound that are the same as like layers of paint and create these sound paintings. And
So
Hendrix
cool.
talked about it too. And I always felt that like, well, where's that? Where are
Yeah.
people wanting to do that in music?
It's out there, I'm sure. I mean, in these day and age too, there's just there's so many
Well,
people doing
yeah,
music.
it's just not hitting to the top.
You
I
you
talk to
you don't
musicians all
you
the time.
don't get all of it because you just kind of get what's trending on
Yeah,
TikTok or whatever. But all the jazz artists, I mean, you used to remember when there was an era when jazz was the most popular music in
yeah,
America, you know,
yeah, we're
like
not there anymore.
that Count Basie was like pop music, you
Yeah,
know.
we're in a niche now. It's a
I
niche.
know now.
I think it's a niche, but,
I know.
it's a big niche, but
Yeah.
it's a yeah, I think that to me, it's like music is life and life is music.
Yeah.
And, the idea of a sound painting, the visualization of what
I
your
love
sound
that image.
be,
I
I
love
think
that. And being able to popularize something, a music like that, like we haven't really had a band like the Beatles in a while who were so groundbreaking and at the forefront of everything in terms of experimentation. I mean, they started kind of normal for the
yeah,
time,
they were kind of a pop band.
but
They
then they
were like the
became,
original
yeah,
teeny bopper band.
yeah, but then they became so famous they could do whatever
They
they
wanted
wanted, you know? So
yeah.
I'm like, when is Taylor Swift gonna get weird? Like, she's got the audience. She's not gonna lose people. Like, come on.
We got the bands like they're kind of standard bearers of that, or like the Wilcos, the
Right.
Radioheads.
Yeah.
They'll do stuff that's experimental, and I'm all over that because
Yeah. That's
that's
true. Radiohead's out there.
yeah, they're kind of continuing like
Yeah.
what could you do?
Yeah. That's inspiring.
They're always especially I'm a synthesist. I
Yeah.
love the synthesis stuff they do
Totally.
with like the modular stuff they do and the
Yeah.
experimental stuff they're willing to do on stage
Yeah.
and just kind of go beyond what the original recording is. And
Yeah.
I just like to see people kind of stretch because I think it's like music has become so disposable and everybody's kind of like, oh, it's a background for me jogging or cooking,
I know.
doing something other than listening to it.
Totally. I think a lot of musicians, I always think like the greatest gift you can give a musician besides money, I think, is putting on a pair of really good headphones and listening to their whole album while doing nothing else. And
I've kind of said that, today people don't understand that an album is like the great American novel.
it's like somebody writing a book. You pour years, decades of your life into this thing that you're crafting. And if you actually take the time to listen to the nuances that go into, I just did an album earlier this year, and like the amount of time that my mixer did his genius editing, I'm just like, I would love to do like a 4-hour presentation on like the way that he stacked my clarinet, over like 15 clarinet harmonies in this incredible way, creating this pattern.
That's behind the music stuff I like to do. Like I like to go into the depths, like what, like I was watching this documentary on by Peter Gabriel.
Oh,
he was talking about the shadow vocals. He was talking about how a drum part, they actually went and they took tape and they cut it up.
Oh, that's
and then
cool.
they mixed it all around. They actually took the slices of the physical tape for the drum tracks and moved them around.
Wow.
And actually put them in out of order.
Oh my gosh.
Totally non-sequential order, just to see what would happen, kind of like a Brian Eno at
That's
the
amazing
experiment.
with
And
tape.
that's the kind of stuff I like, that people are willing to go to that depth for their art.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you only listen to the single, you don't get that.
You don't get it. You don't get behind the scenes. Like, if I had the resource, I mean, I thought about like really making little mini documentaries for every song. I would have loved to have done that for my last record, just to like show people like, do you really understand like what's going on here?
Well, I think it's useful because video is so big today.
Yeah.
If you could get kids today to understand the level of work that goes into a song,
it's amazing.
That it's not a throwaway thing because it's been kind of demonetized.
Yeah.
Because of Napster, because of streaming, and the art we create is not valued like if you go and look at a video game, Nintendo can get $90 for Mario Kart.
Totally. Yeah.
But we can't get $5. You can't get 99 cents for a song. You get
no way.
It's way to pay $20 for a shirt.
It's really
like the guy who goes, sure, I can get somebody to buy this.
Yeah, we're in
write the song.
Yeah. No, I hear you. A song which someone's poured like 10 grand into in like 5 years. But we're just in the worst framework for music business right now in terms of the streaming culture that's ever been for musicians. It's just really unfortunate. So
but that's why it's interesting, because you've got this whole idea of having a process to get people to kind of treat it like you do, like a retreat. Is that what you do?
Yeah, so I do. So I've run a whole songwriting community. I created a space for which was born out of my own journey as a songwriter way back in 2009, when I was starting to play more of like intimate songs. I felt nervous about playing them in front of people, so I created this event in my living room called the Songwriter Soiree, and I invited the most well-known songwriters I could find and a bunch of friends over. 50 people showed up, and we created this really amazing space, which blew up into this whole underground cult, like monthly gathering with cameos, and Portlandia came and filmed it. And it was just, it was this whole thing. And so then I started doing retreats. So I do these 2 big songwriting retreats every year with 100 people from all over the country. And we have amazing teachers, and it's a 4-day deep dive. And yeah, in that space, there's really, space for people to connect and drop into their flow state and stretch their boundaries and play with each other and collaborate.
It's
And it's
really creative because I think that's what we have to do as creators.
yeah,
We have to find new ways to connect our art to the world
yeah,
and make it so it has like a value proposition. No, we don't. We're not a widget. We're not the
exactly.
you know, we really value what we're doing. But like there, like you're sharing like your lessons learned. You're creating a space like like a collective. Like I
Yeah,
like
it's
to
kind of a
go.
collective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like to go and play like with a bunch of electronic bands in New York. Like
Uh-huh.
I'll go play with like instead of going with just me, I'll go with like 4 or 5 other bands
Yeah.
and kinda have that collective
Yeah,
kind of space. Because then there's this room to like, oh, we can jam together. We don't know what's gonna
absolutely.
come from that, and then we might go work on a record together. We might work on a project. I might do keys on their thing, and they might do it
Absolutely.
that to me is kinda like, back in the day, the CBGB kind of scene,
Yeah,
where you had the Talking Heads and the Ramones and
totally.
Blondie, Television. It's like there was a lot of cross-pollination going on with ideas, even though, you might not have realized that they were all talking to each other, getting bouncing things off each other.
Totally. People in the same genre and world, they all hang out. And so, I want to support a lot of songwriters feel isolated. They don't know where to play their music. They don't know how to get a band going. And so we get them all in the same space and they all connect now. A bunch of them have started bands. There's two of them that have started their own weekly and monthly gatherings online and in person. There's all these collaborations happening. People in different cities meet up. They're like, oh yeah, I went to the songwriting retreat. Oh yeah, me too. There's like an instant trust built,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's this whole community network, kind of like a church or a football team or like music,
Well,
and
we
it's
musicians always, we become the fans of each other,
yeah, we become the fans of each other,
It's kinda
and
like
they
the
all
Velvet
play we all play in
Underground.
each other's stuff.
Remember,
Yeah,
like, everybody said Lou Reed said, like, everybody all these bands said that they were inspired by me. I wish I got paid for that.
I know, right? I
He said, "Oh, I
know. You
wish I
just
got
have
some
to,
of the
as an
money for
artist, you
that."
have to
I'm
just
like,
know that you're gonna steal and you're gonna give and you're gonna get. Yeah.
yeah, but I think it's just awesome to, like, just get into the idea of deconstructing, like, the creative process
Mm,
and starting to really unpack it so people, because there's like some people have like this fear
yep.
of the entry point, right? They don't give themselves the permission. Because I know a bunch of guys that they got their guitars are sitting in their basement or their
Dude.
garage and they just stopped.
Yeah.
And I never stopped because I love to play just to play,
Yeah.
whether it's gonna make money or not. I just play all the time. I'm just gonna play because I love to play.
Yeah.
Some people like, well, why are you doing the music? Like, why are you in the creativity? Like, sometimes if you realize it's part of your cathartic process or it's part of something that you love,
Mhm.
and you can actually understand like what is it the reason why you're in it, versus
Yeah.
is it just like pay to play?
Yeah.
If you don't hit this mark, then you're done.
No, I think a lot of people, yeah, I love that you're really clued into like a lot of stuff I'm interested in. Like permission is a huge word. A lot of people don't really give themselves permission, or they don't want to play unless they know people are listening or they're gonna make it in some way. And a lot of the folks that come to my events are, yeah, they're like procrastinating, they don't have motivation, but there's this part of them like eating them up inside. Like, I need to express myself, but I don't know how to do my creativity. And a lot of what we do is we create the space. I really think like a lot of it's creating the right space for people, one that's
Yeah,
supportive and safe and non-judgmental, where they realize they can mess up and they're going to be cheered instead of booed, and they're going to be supported no matter what. And we do this thing in the beginning of our retreats where we have everyone. I learned this at a youth camp I used to teach at. We have everyone reach in their back pocket and pull out their cool card, and their cool card is like a card everyone carries, which keeps you cool, but it also keeps you from like having fun and taking risks and fear of judgment. And we do a whole ritual wherever we get everyone to hold up their card and they tear it up together, and we give them permission to be like total
working.
dorks,
Yeah, but that's the
for
whole
the
thing.
5 days.
I mean, Frank Zappa, if he was worried about that, then we wouldn't have
Oh
anything.
my God. Yeah, it's like some people you just have to put it out there, not make it about you. and just think like, how am I contributing to the space rather than like what I hope people think I'm
There's no
cool.
bad note. There's an opportunity. The way I look
I
at it
love
is
it.
like that a lot of times, especially like in fusion jazz, is like the idea,
Mhm.
Hancock and
Yeah, no bad.
Miles talked. There's no
Yeah,
bad news because like you can if when you're playing live like that, like modal jazz or experimental electronic, like whatever comes about, like you take advantage of that detuned note
yes.
and you go with it. Like I
Go
love
with
the
it.
fact that like my Moog, I'll kind of detune things on purpose, like
Uh-huh.
detune the oscillators, be a little off,
Yeah.
just because that's gonna bring the character, that brings the color. And if I'm like in that moment, that detuned oscillator, that kind of phasing in and out, or like
Totally.
something being a little strange, like how LFO treating something a little different than this thing, or triggering something else, is like that's the fun in how you come up with your secret sauce.
Yeah.
And your
There
secret sauce is gonna be like this unknown, not found sound.
yeah.
And the problem is everybody wants the found sound.
Everyone wants to
And if they the unfound sound, unknown sound, like that is scary. And so
Ooh,
you're
yeah.
kind of gonna hide it, or you embrace it.
Yeah,
So
embrace it. Well, there's that Miles Davis quote. It's not the note you play that's the wrong note. It's the note you play after that note that determines whether it's right or wrong.
yeah, that's an opportunity, because it's an
Yeah.
opportunity to
So
evolve the piece.
you make a choice and then you get to you have a response to it and redirect it.
You
And
can
that's just such a
redirect it.
great
Yeah.
life lesson. I mean, it's such a great life lesson about life, like how you do anything in life.
It's
It's
like if
not,
you're
yeah,
think if you're an athlete, you study all the plays.
yeah,
But if this team you're going against does a play you don't recognize, are you just gonna throw it up and say, I don't know how to run?
exactly.
That's the same thing a musician does, that they heard a note that wasn't expected, and they go with what would work with that
Yeah,
versus what was planned.
yeah,
If you stay wedded to what was planned, it's like a TEDx speaker, reading, like they had this idea, but they read the crowd and said, "Well, that's not working." Like
uh-huh.
like a comedian that's doing a bad,
Totally.
that's
You can't just stick to it.
yes, just stick to it. You stick to it, you're gonna go down in flames.
Yeah,
So you think so are you gonna stick to it because that's what was on the page, or are you gonna go with what you feel?
yeah,
And it's a lot of it is like, learn how to be in touch with the feelings
yeah,
and the vibes
yeah. And that's a
and
huge part.
frequency.
Life lessons from music, man. Learn how to be in touch with the feelings and the vibes. Learn how to listen. I learned from a friend of mine who's a professional uh, comedy improv artist, and she can never mess up on stage. It's impossible for her to do that.
Yeah,
And because she's so good at taking whatever happens in the
choose.
audience
Yeah,
and
pick it
using
up
it
on
into comedy. And I've seen people like just scream at her, like crazy people from the audience, and just I've seen her like mess up so many times, and
the covers.
she doesn't just cover, she uses it as kindling
That's
to
the
make the
next
fire
yeah,
bigger.
the next thing.
It's like
Yeah,
if the mistake hadn't happened, it would have been
what
fine, but
triggers the next move.
we
It's like
welcome the mistake actually made the show better because it allowed her to be even more authentic. And so yeah, so life lessons from music, like when your life messes up, like
well,
how
that's the
can you
opportunity
how can you
because
look at it? And I think we all struggle with that when life messes up, we can feel like a victim or it can take the wind out of our sails. But it's really like that spiritual path as humans of like how can you breathe with it, feel into what else is happening in your life and let it lift you higher.
well, it's like
So
James Taylor, like when I've seen Fire, I See
I
Rain,
see rain. That's
right,
a
right?
great.
And it came from like a lot of the depths of the things he was going through, right?
Yeah.
And when he got married and got happy, he did an album that did not resonate because
Yep.
his fans actually liked when he was in more dark places,
More of a yeah,
and
melancholic.
and where he had been able to evoke from those dark places, like songs like when I've seen Fire, I See Rain, but
Yeah.
when he had songs that were more happy,
Yeah.
they didn't dig it.
I know.
Now that do you want to be in that place all the time, but it kind of shows you that sometimes what resonates is like the feelings that people, a lot of fans, they have the everybody's gone through that,
Yeah.
and people want things that kind of validate their feelings.
Yeah.
And I think music is so personal when you find songs that kind of validate your experience and becomes like your soundtracks of your
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely. There's science that's like shows you, of course, you probably know it, like when you're sad and you listen to a sad song, it makes you happy. It's like the two negatives equal a positive kind of thing, because it gives you a place to relate to it and get it out of you. And when something outside of you is expressing the way you feel, you don't feel so alone. And so
Yeah,
that's why sad songs tend to be more popular than happy songs.
yeah.
And why most people's songs tend to be heartbreakers.
But the exception is funk.
With the exception of funk. Oh my, I
Yeah,
used to be so into Parliament, and I just
but I
was
just
like,
love. But the thing about funk is kind of strange because like funk has that beat that's like gonna make you want to get up
yeah,
and really tear the roof off. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But the fact is, like in it, you can be saying things like you can have a
totally.
dichotomy. You could have this very upbeat thing, but then you could be saying something.
And I love that
The duality,
juxtaposition.
yeah, the duality of it. Like
Yeah,
the people like to play with duality.
yeah, I
Like you
love
can
the
have a very
happy.
upbeat track, but the
Uh-huh.
lyrics could be really down.
It could be really down. Yeah, yeah, or the other way around
Yeah,
sometimes
you can have
happen.
it like both ways. And like
I
and so
love
you
it.
can
I love
speak
that
things
though.
in.
Yeah, yeah. So that's cool. I love what you were saying about like about tuning into the vibe and listening. It made me think about one of the lessons that I love that I think I've learned the most from music is how to listen in life. And when you're so here I'll use a story. I used to play with this guy who was a phenomenal trumpet player. Like he shredded me, but I think other people in my band were better musicians than him, and he thought he was the best musician, and I was like, well, you're not really. You know how to play your instrument better, but you're not. A good musician is somebody that is, it's about the connection and the community and the listening. So I was like, if you had a conversation like the way you're playing, you wouldn't really have any friends because you wouldn't have any space for other people to
Oh yeah, like it's
speak. And
even
so
like yeah.
it's about giving space. When you're a musician, I think the thing I love to do the most is to just listen. And I play in this improv group called Everyone Orchestra, which is a really cool band. It's led by this guy who tours all over the world, and he goes to an event and finds all the best musicians at like a music festival, and
Yeah.
puts them all together on stage, and the whole set is improvised.
Yeah, it's kinda like what Miles used to do is put all these great people around him,
Yeah,
and he wasn't always showboating, like, he's letting
yeah,
folks
yeah, yeah,
in,
yeah.
and the idea,
Giving everyone a chance. Yeah,
like, I love about the story about, like, Robbie Roberts. Robbie
I love, yeah,
Robertson
Robbie Robertson.
wasn't a speed demon, wasn't one of these
No,
wasn't like a Hendrix, right? But he let the rest of the band be
yeah,
able to kind of be there.
yeah,
He let, like, Manuel and all those great guys in that band. I mean, everybody was great.
yeah.
Everybody was great, and he let everybody have their way to shine in the songs,
He
and his
knew.
stuff is very understated,
Yeah,
his
he was in
guitar.
service of the music and the
Yeah,
experience for the audience, not himself. And
yeah,
that is what makes a good musician and I think a good person. When you can be thinking, I think humans are so self-centered in general. and,
yeah,
and we could save ourselves a lot of pain, myself included, when instead of thinking like, oh, I'm so insecure, I'm a victim, what do people think of me? Like, how can I be uplifting this moment? How can I give a gift to somebody right now? Who needs what? Where's the quietest voice in the room? How can I amplify something?
yeah,
And
I
I
think
think,
everybody to
yeah,
kinda like I loved about The Who is, like, they were all going, like, their own way.
yeah,
Like, if you think about The Who, compared to any big rock band, everybody's soloing at the
right.
same time.
That's true.
And it's like they're all getting out. They're all like lead bass, lead drummer,
Uh huh.
and maybe Pete is the only one not really being playing as much lead. He's
Yeah,
actually kind of facilitating. He not showboating, and Moon was showboating more than him.
but
And
they knew
plus,
how to weave, kind of
yeah,
like
it's a weave.
kind of like a New Orleans Dixieland group. They
Yeah,
they knew how to weave around each other.
they weave that kind of independence of like
Yeah,
it's a progressive band that's kind of a punk rock band.
yeah,
It's like they're doing rock operas, but they got a punk aesthetic.
yeah. It's
Like,
it's
how's
pretty
that? That's
cool.
like a dichotomy. It's like, how can you do that?
Genius. Yeah,
Yeah, I just love to see people kind of be able to get like the best out of like everybody.
yeah,
Like you say, if you can be in a group that actually can get everybody to pull their A game or better.
Yeah.
And you're not suppressing people and push, saying like, oh, no, don't, you know, you just have this kind of really let everybody shine and see what happens,
It's the best. I have a band and they're all amazing musicians and I love just giving them all moments and I don't want it to be about me as much. I know
Facilitator.
I
Yeah.
always love playing with people better than me because it just pushes me.
Make you better. And
Yeah,
if you
I
play with
always
people
did.
better, then
I always
they
looked for the groups I could join where there were better players than me and it pushes me. So,
yeah, I think that's the
yeah.
whole creative like philosophy.
Yeah.
I think everybody is creative. I think there's a lot of people that say they can't, that they won't, they have no ability.
Oh yeah, I was gonna speak to that. Thanks. You're bringing up all sorts of great topics, man. I appreciate it. It's like I was like, who is this guy? I don't know much about him, but yeah, you're totally on that. I can't agree more. I think that everybody's creative. There is a thing in our culture, especially I think around like creativity is sort of reserved for like a chosen few,
Yeah,
which get
everybody's got to be Oscar Wilde. They
but
got to be Orson Welles.
yeah, it's a cultural thing though. I mean, in America, it's like we live in a place of like idolizing the one. You know, you just look at our TV shows and the media we're fed, and other cultures are more egalitarian around that
Yeah,
and sort
yeah,
of.
yeah. Yeah, I lived in the East. I lived in Tokyo, so I
Oh, that's
understand.
cool. That's
Yeah, for
cool.
2 years.
Awesome.
So like yeah, there's a little more of societal recognition of not just the individual but the whole.
The whole, yeah, the
Yeah,
whole,
and there's less, in the you go east and you'll start to see more of that.
even more. Yeah,
Yeah, here the individualism is to the detriment of the
yeah,
entire group sometimes. Because I
yeah.
was a sociology major in like microcosm,
Oh, that's
macrocosm.
cool. I studied ethnomusicology and anthropology, so that's some crossover.
Yeah, so it's like the microcosm affects the macrocosm, macrocosm affects
Yeah,
the microcosm. Everybody's like, "Oh, suffering from anomie," and everybody's like, got their own trip here. But
yeah,
we tend to get motivated by like the wolf at the door,
yeah,
and everybody wants the sameness, but then they say they want the individual. They say they want the creative person, but they put them in a cube.
yep.
9 to 5 is like, if you want like somebody to be like Steve Jobs, it's
Uh-huh.
not going to happen in the cube.
No. Oh my gosh. No. Totally. You want it's because they want the control and the system. But I mean, there are leaders that recognize the benefits of helping people be creative and creating creative environments that stimulate creativity. If I ever like owned a big business with lots of employees, I'd put like trampolines and like
Yeah,
rose gardens in
yeah,
there
the more advanced,
and like places
yeah,
with like marimbas people could
like
play during
startups.
lunch break.
Well, started like it's the reveal. Like in my day job,
Uh-huh.
I'm into software design,
Okay.
and I'm working with like a smaller startup, and I kind of made a choice to go with smaller companies
Mhm.
instead of being with the big guys. Because what I found is the big guys will say they want to be like the startups, but they're not.
Right.
They try to say they can do it, and they'll get whole directors and divisions saying that they are, and then they're not.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, I'll be where that really is happening."
Mhm.
So you go to the place where the people allow you to wear a lot of hats based
Yeah.
on whatever is needed, and if you can ramp up, you can do it.
Yeah.
And so, like, in that kind of environment, show off your skill set and not feel afraid to speak up in a meeting where the corporate
Totally.
you
You gotta
be
create the space for creativity to be
muzzled.
allowed, and that means being allowed to make mistakes, and, I think being creative is like, yeah, allowing people to make mistakes and
Iterative.
have it be objective and, like, anything goes and, like, be curious, like, "Oh, well, look at that, okay."
Well, and if you're an inventor, if you're in design,
Yeah.
in software, we have iterative agile development, which means
Uh-huh.
we go with multiple iterative steps, right? And it's not always like this whole waterfall thing where everything was like gotta be perfect.
No. Oh my
And
god. Well, for every produced Beatles song, there was 20 that were never recorded,
yeah, I
you
mean, if you
know?
go look at Prince, like look at the output he had. Like there's 8,000 songs that were never released,
Yes, it's insanity.
right? So
People
think
only
about
see the
what he
tip.
was holding back versus what he put out.
Yeah,
Right? So that for every song he did, he had this 8,000, 10,000 sitting in the can.
yeah.
And that's kind of like, look at Hendrix. I got all this
That's
old Hendrix.
crazy.
He has massive amounts of like I was listening to outtakes from like Electric Lady, and he's got all these variations of the solos they would have done
Oh,
versus the one that he actually put on the
that's
record.
awesome.
But they're all great, but it's like there was something he was
Uh-huh.
looking for.
Yeah.
And then like I don't know what he was looking for, but I guess that's what he put out is what he was looking for.
Yeah.
Everything else is like it sounds good to me. I could have used that, but it's like well, he didn't think it was right. But that's the thing. That
Yeah.
people don't understand that how
Yeah.
much work goes into it.
Yeah. And a lot of people have a hard time taking risks, or they're not encouraged in their schooling and our society to be creative and to like have that flow. And I one of the ways that I like to help people be more creative in their lives is through taking risks, little risks in your everyday life.
The wins. So like
Yeah, so like singing in the car, or I don't know, like doing stuff with your I do a lot of stuff with people's voices, because a lot of people have vocal blocks, and I think
block.
a
Yeah.
quick way to access your creativity is through singing.
Mhm.
And so I encourage people to like sing about mundane things in their life, like
Well,
make
to
up a
get their
song when they're
voice
vacuuming,
to
or
to get used to her singing voice, because
yeah,
I think that's always, like, the big permission thing I always talk to a lot of
permission, yeah.
songwriters, like, when they finally realized or gave themselves permission to sing their own song
Yes.
or to sing something and actually try that voice.
Yeah.
And it's kinda like that thing with, like, well, you get a Lou Reed, you get a Dylan, but that is not the normal singing voice.
No.
And so there's somebody
Yeah.
had to make and that gave a permission structure, like, Lou Reed gave a permission structure for, like, the whole all you know, indie world,
Yep.
you know, and so did Dylan gave that permission structure. So many other songwriters came along and said, "Hey, I don't have to have a perfect pitch voice.
No, I just have the spirit.
You just have the spirit. Be like Joe Strummer from the Clash.
Yeah.
We're the only band that matters. I don't care that I don't have a perfect pitch. I have something to say."
Yeah.
Joey Ramone. He's like, I'm going to just do it.
It's just the energy. It's
Yeah.
it's their total persona and energy, and they own it. They just own themselves and the emotion.
Then you don't worry about it. That's what I liked about the punk aesthetic.
Yeah.
Was that you could get on the stage like Joey Ramone or like, Joe Strummer,
Hmm.
think about Joy Division. All these guys this suddenly just got up and said, "Hey, I don't have to be like John Lennon and Paul McCartney. I don't have to be at that level. I don't have to be like, a Motown singer." And there was like this whole gate. Like if you can't be singing unless you're at like, Motown level, like
Totally.
Stax level, the Frank Sinatra level. You can't get through the gate unless you're at that level, and then it became this new egalitarian thing,
Totally.
and then
Where
hip hop opened up for people saying, "Hey,
imperfect was cool.
yeah." And then rap
Yeah.
said, "Well, I can be a poet. I can
Yeah.
be a street poet,
Yeah.
and I can just become a performer and just be a performer by kind of taking a Dylan aspect and just saying I'm going to be a street poet and just say what I feel, like the modern folk music to
Yeah.
me is hip hop."
There's a lot of permission givers out there, and there's a lot of like there's a sort of cultural norm thing, and then I just praise those people that like are brave enough to be themselves, and they kind of create a whole thing, and they kind of unlock a whole world for other people. It's amazing in my songwriting community how many I attract a lot of songwriters come into the community who are closet songwriters, or they're scared of being seen and being
Mhm.
heard or playing their music. And so much of it is like, yeah, giving them feeling like they suddenly have permission to just be themselves. And
Yeah,
that
to have that open mic kind of
it's
be like,
holding them back so much from their life. And then they come to our space and they're like, oh my God, everyone's so disarmed here. And they're celebrating not just imperfection, but they're celebrating disaster.
well, you're
And
giving them kind of like that coffee shop kind of
yeah.
art kind of like I used to live in like Northampton,
Oh,
Mass,
cool.
and they had these places where you could do like fire and water cafe. You could just go
Uh-huh.
and
Yep.
all these kids from Mount Holyoke and Smith would go in there and just be like beat poets, just going
Yeah.
on stage and musicians and people with guitars. And it gave a permission structure that people were very encouraging.
Yep.
And they would click in, and saying, "Yeah, that's cool." So you got to give people these spaces
Yeah. And
where
that
they can be disarmed and not feel like they're going to get attacked.
exactly. That's what we do at the monthly I host a monthly event in Portland, We usually get like 80 to 100 people every month, and we create a living room in this ballroom. We bring in couches and cushions, and we make it all comfy, and then we put all these posters all over the walls that are like positive affirmations and
Yeah,
like
cool.
stuff like, you know,
Yes,
mess up here, like safe space. And people come in there like, oh my God, I already feel welcome. And we just had a very common thing. Like we had a guy last week who played a great song. And he was like, this was the first time I ever performed in front of anybody in my entire life in any way.
well, that's
Um,
great that you
and I
gave
wrote,
him
and all the songs have to be original. So it's his original. And I was like, and I asked him on stage, I was like, how was that for you? He was like, well, I felt like I was going to throw up, but
that's
I feel so free. And I've been coming to this event for 2 years, and I finally got the courage to come
to
up
go on stage.
because I saw enough other people getting up on stage and crying and like, you know,
I just think it's great because I believe that's, human creativity in this kind of indie space where
yeah.
people like the emerging songwriters. That's why I created this podcast. Is I don't need to push the list people or the
Mm,
B list people. I want to see where things are happening in the
cool.
underground, in their emerging areas.
Yeah.
That's where like the salvation of the arts is, because that's where the new thing. That's where you get the new Dylan, the new Springsteen, the new whatever.
Yeah.
That's where it will come. Is for if you encourage people to have that voice, then you'll get that unique spin, which is what to me is what I want to hear. I don't need to hear what's already out there.
The
Yeah,
craft. Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate this space, and I can tell you are a very thoughtful person. You bring a lot of cool perspectives, and you care a lot about music and creativity and people. And by doing the podcast, I imagine you just meet so many people, so you have a pretty in-depth perspective on humanity. You know,
it's just fun. It's like a master class in human
totally. Yeah.
capability and creativity. But I
Yeah.
want people to know they can click on your link there,
Cool.
and that will be fully clickable. We've been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on multiple podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon by tomorrow. And
Awesome.
thank you for being on the Fan Electric Ghost podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I just hope that anyone who's wanting to express their creativity, you do it. And if you need support, we're here for you. Check out my website for all the ways you can tap into our community from anywhere in the world.
Thank you. Have
All
a
right.
great night.
All right. Thank you, Keith.
Bye.